It is 9:31, so we really should get going. I'm just going to check the Councillors' Lounge. All right. Can see everyone just getting ready. So we're live streaming now, team. That's right, Councillor Halliday. Well, look, good morning, everyone. We've got a reduced cast this morning with some staff away and obviously His Worship the Mayor and the Chief Executive. But I want to welcome you all this morning to the Strategy and Operations meeting for Thursday, the 19th of November. The order of agenda, we've got a reasonably full agenda today, but not as burdensome as I thought it was going to be. We have the council blessing, so would an elected member like to read that either in English or Te Reo? Councillor Randall, if you want to read it in. If you just flick your microphone on. Thanks, Councillor Randall.
As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just, so that with courage, vision, and energy, we provide positive leadership in a spirit of harmony and compassion.
Thanks very much, Bernie. Just move on to item number 3 of the agenda, which is apologies. We have His Worship the Mayor as an elected member away, but just also noting the Chief Executive is away. They're at the Rural and Provincial, so they're at obviously another council engagement. And I'm not, Grayson, I wasn't aware of anyone else that's put an apologies. Thank you, and Councillor Elliott has to just slip out for a wee bit and may or may not be back, just depending on that. So if someone could move the apologies. Moved by Councillor Halliday, seconded by Councillor Hanford. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. Item number 4, declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda. I'm not aware of any being brought to my attention, and I can't see anyone signalling around the table, jumping up and down. So we'll move on to item number 5, which is public speaking time. And again, I've not been made aware of anyone wanting to come and speak to us this morning. Item number 6, members' business. There is no responses to public speaking. Does any elected members have any leave of absence they want to apply for? No. I guess we've all got Christmas coming up. Item 6C is matters of an urgent nature. And again, I haven't been made aware of any from members. And so I move on to item number 7, which is updates, and there is none. And so we now move on to item number 8.1, which is the finance report as of the 30th of September. Now, Grayson, I know that Mark is joining us via Zoom. And just checking if it's Mark. Okay, so do we have, I see Hamish has come in. Do we want to move one of the, we have moved through the first part of the agenda relatively quickly because there's obviously no public speaking and so forth. So, Hamish, are you here for the item number on the agenda? Mark's just joined now. Okay.
Mark's dialing in for that one. Sorry.
Finance, he's available? Okay, just checked that he wasn't on yet. Thanks, Hamish. We'll just see how we go with Mark, and if I need to, I might just get you to come forward. So, team, look, we're just going to wait a few. 30 seconds or so and see whether we can get Mark on board, and he's going to walk us through the finance report on page 6. All right, team, we're just going to allow Grayson to get that sorted with Mark. Grayson, if you could just chat with Mark offline and just let him know what's happening and when he's ready. We're going to move to item number 8.2, which is contracts under delegated authority on page 29. It's 29 of your agenda. And Sean, are you going to walk us through that?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. The might be a bit of a sprint. There isn't, I guess, due to the timing of the report, there are no contracts that have been awarded above that $250,000 threshold between July and September. So the report generally reflects any of those contracts that we signed during the year, and we report back to this committee. So.
All right, team, so there's no contracts to actually report back on. It is an example of business as usual. If we don't have any questions, if an elected member could move recommendation 7 on page 29. Moved by Councillor Elliott. Sorry, I saw Councillor Randall seconded by Councillor Randall. Right of introduction. Waived. Thanks, Councillor Elliott. Any further discussion? No. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. Carried. Grayson, have we got Mark ready now? Not quite yet. All right. Sean, have we got another agenda? Can we bring Hamish forward for the psychoactive substances? Are you okay with that, Hamish? You ready? All right. If you want to come up, we're going to move, team, just so that we're not sitting idle and doing nothing. We're going to move through to item number 8.3 on page 31 of the agenda, psychoactive substances. It's a big topic back in the day when it was originally voted on. As you can see from the body of the report, many councils followed suit and adopted similar policies, and many councils also have just rolled their policies over. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Hamish. Hamish can walk us through the report and then answer any questions that elected members may have, and then we can look to see whether there's appetite to move the recommendations as recommended by staff. So, good morning, Hamish. Over to you.
Morning, everyone. Mr. Chair, thank you. And first of all, I'd just like to pass on apologies for Aston. She really wanted to be here to talk to the paper. She was involved in the briefing, but has been away sick the last few days, so I'm subbing in. But I'll just to give you an overview of the actual topic in the paper, as kind of provided in a quick summary there by James, or Councillor Coote, sorry. The original policy we had was approved back in 2015, and that followed legislation coming into manage psychoactive substances under the Act in 2013. And at the time, a policy was put forward specifically to help manage and the sale of psychoactive substances that were approved locally. And one of the key purposes of that is to actually define where they could be sold and the conditions that could be put in that. And there was quite a lot of discussion and debate at the time around that, and it was confirmed through that processes that in putting local policies in place to manage potential sale of substances, it wasn't possible to put blanket bans on them at the time. So that was a key discussion point at the time, and an identification of the current sites that we have available on the policy. Another important kind of consideration as part of the regime is that there's a number of requirements for any potential psychoactive products to go through before they even can be available for sales, and that includes licensing conditions under Ministry of Health guidelines, and also there's a number of requirements down at the local level, and that sets quite a high bar. And I guess some key context to the policy and its purpose at the time and where we are now is that there has in fact been no actual licences brought forward through that process under the legislation.
Sorry, Hamish, I'll just check with Councillor Randall. Is your microphone just flicking on there?
It keeps going red when Hamish is speaking. It should be green.
Sure.
No, nothing wrong with Hamish, but I would like to speak.
Okay, and so you're just signalling your request to speak at the end, and it's going red rather than green. So, Grayson, are we able to?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, thanks, Councillor Randall. We'll just hand it back to Hamish. Thanks, Hamish.
So quite key context to the consideration and context around the policy itself. It was there at the time to actually help any potential products that might come through and where they could be sold. But obviously key to that is since the legislation was put in place, there have been no applications or processes put through to the Ministry of Health for any such products. And so, as such, nationally, there has been no application of these policies as such, but the policies remain in place in case there is the potential in the future. So, with that context in mind, we've gone through the process to review this policy as was required every 5 years. We've identified and looked at some of the conditions that are in the current policy and have identified no areas of amendment or change to those that are currently there that define where that potential sale site is. And so we've identified a range of options on the basis of that to consider, including the potential around revoking the policy. And then there's two other options about actually maintaining the current policy and whether it's consulted on or not. And the preferred option we put forward on the basis that there have been no amendments and no changes to the process is to actually take the policy forward and renew it as it is for a further 5 years, and then come back and review it as necessary or in that 5 year period under legislation. So happy to take questions, take the report as read and take questions.
Thanks very much, Hamish. And look, I'll move to Councillor Randall in a minute, but just reminding elected members, there's three options in the paper. One's to revoke the policy. The second is to consult on the unamended or unchanged policy. And the third is to renew unamended without consultation, which is the option that staff put forward as the recommended option. So those are the three options in the paper. And just reminding elected members too, it was only a few weeks ago we decided to not do a review based on the cost of doing that review around a representation review. So, if we decided to consult, there's a cost attached to that as well. So, Councillor Randall, I've got you down, and then Councillor McCann next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hamish, I'd like to ask you three questions, and I just want a yes or no answer, please. Did you consult or have informal discussions with Raised Pies in Kapiti Road? All you have to do is answer yes or no. That's the shop. And
Councillor Randall, can I just, as Chair, appreciate the question and have no issue, but in terms of directing the staff around how they respond, if Hamish wants to elaborate, I think it's fair to allow
that's okay.
someone to elaborate.
I thought you would tell me to, you wanted to move it along.
No, not at all. I look absolutely fine, Hamish. I just didn't want to box you in.
As long as you like, Hamish.
Over to you, Hamish.
As part of the process, we did some analysis of the site and changes of impacts. We haven't gone out for extensive consultation, either locally or more broadly, but we have discussed with iwi and approached iwi, given their significant interest at the initial policy. I guess, as the paper outlines, we understand and identify a lot of the ongoing, at the initial development of the paper, a lot of the community interests and concerns at the time. And on the basis of, and a lot of the analysis was on the basis that there are no substantive changes or amendments, we couldn't identify any changing factors of the sites or the fact that there had been no sale, no products for sale nationally or locally as one of the considerations in the review.
Okay. Second part of it relates to the school. There's a Catholic school and church nearby. Did you have informal discussions with them this time round?
The identification of the school was known when the initial policy was developed. and that sits within some of the criteria that were defined under the policy within 100 metres of the sale site. And so in that assessment we did of the sale site of the current policy, we hadn't seen any changes to sensitive activities located within that proximity to the site that's identified in the policy.
Okay, and thank you. And the last question is, did you consult with the owners, landowners of some of those buildings in that vicinity?
Similar to the last response.
Okay, thank you.
I think I had Councillor McCann next and it's just dropped off. Okay, thank you. Councillor Compton. That's unusual. Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Page 34.30.4. In terms of option 3, it's got this approach saves staff time and resources, but also provides the opportunity to review the policy again should any circumstances change in time. So that's my understanding. That's referring to there's about a 2-year lag if someone was to seek regulatory approval for one of these approved substances to come onto market. So that your understanding is that would give us ample time to update this if and when that situation arose?
Potentially, I guess the policy would stand as is now, but if there was a need for further cause or concern to review the policy, the ability is there to review it at any point in time should council make that decision, would be my understanding. We're just looking at the minimum requirement now that's required under the actual primary legislation for making a local policy for this purpose has to be done at least or reviewed, commenced at least every 5 years.
That's the last name I had back up on the screen, so I'm just checking before we move to see whether someone wants to move the motion. Councillor Holborough.
So could you just clarify the process for revoking the policy? Is that just fairly straightforward? We just decide to revoke it and then it's done? We don't have to do any consultation, or because it is a change from the status quo, so wouldn't it require some consultation about the decision to revoke, or does it not?
Look, I think the signal that we're getting is that staff would need to come back to you on that one. And obviously just with not having the author of the report here, Hamish isn't in the position to give you an answer that he's 100% confident with. So
I may be able to.
Okay,
Just the my understanding of the recommendation is that we would just approve the policy as it stands with no change. So we're not revoking it. Well, we're adopting a reviewed policy that remains the same as the previous one.
Yeah, so I understand that that's the recommendation, but one of the options within the paper is to revoke the policy, yeah. But if that's not put forward as an option, then it's not a... it's not.
did you have anything further to add to that? So we've got no other names up on the screen. Is there someone that wants to move recommendation, Councillor Compton, as reported in the paper? Yeah. So Councillor Compton moving recommendation 40.1, 0.2 and 0.3 as per the paper. Councillor Holborough seconded. Right of introduction.
Thank you. Yeah, I think from my perspective, given that nothing has essentially changed in the marketplace since this was developed back in 2015, and we'll have that lead time, we'll have visibility of if there are going to be new products being introduced that might give us, pause to think about where it's located. We will have that lead time to update this policy if we need to. So I'm happy to put this forward and support it being rolled over without any amendments to it, because I think, having followed the debate back in 2015 when this was put in place, it's obviously we have to choose somewhere for it to go, and this is the best possible option in terms of that visibility and ability to police it if allowing the regulatory approval if something did come into the market. And I mean, I'd be surprised if one shop popped up if one product was approved. So I think we're fairly safe in terms of their handling. And the point that Councillor Randall opened around, actually, would the landlords want this sort of business in their area? I mean, that's another check on it as well. So we might have specified one area, but landlords also have a role to play. If they don't want that sort of business, they can make that call as well. So I think there's enough lead time if we need to revisit this that we can do. So happy to support it.
Thanks, Councillor Compton. I don't see any other names on the screen, so... Okay, a couple of just jumping up now. So, Councillor Halliday.
Look, I just want to build on Councillor Compton's views as well. Look, although there are currently no psychoactive substances, they were around. For all we know, there could be people offshore eyeing up the situations here. I think it's important that we send a very, very clear message that if you want to bring these products into this country, it'll be a very, very hard thing to do. If there's no policy around that, I don't think it does send that sort of message. If we have these policies, it just doesn't look attractive for people to bring this sort of product into our area. So I will be supporting, certainly, the status quo, because I do think we need to have a policy around this. I'd also like to mention, if we do have a policy around this, and I know, Councillor Coots, you've been looking at a local alcohol policy, I think one sort of almost follows into the other with regards to how we are looking at these products being in our community.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor McCann.
Thank you. Just building on what both councillors have said, I'm supporting this because it puts a regulatory framework around something that we don't particularly want. And what a shame we lost that opportunity in a referendum recently.
Thank you, Councillor McCann. And I think we had Councillor Holborough, but that has gone away. Okay, so there's no further names up on the screen, so I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Oh, sorry, Councillor, just procedurally, right of replies waived. So all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. Councillor Randall against. Do you want that recorded? Call for division. So those that voted aye, hands up.
So we have Councillor Provanov, Councillor McCann, Councillor Holborough, Councillor Compton, Councillor Buswell, Councillor Halliday, and Councillor Hanford.
And me.
Oh, sorry. And the Chair, Councillor Coots.
And those against?
Councillor Randall. Bernie Randall.
Thank you, Sean. So that's passed. And Hamish, did you have any further reports too, just while you're here? I think just while you're up here, we are mucking around with the agenda a bit, and Mark's available, although I think Mark does need to slip away at some point. So actually just noting that, I'll just check a message from Mark around, Look, I think if we can get you back up again later, if that's okay, just in the interest of time. Team, we are now going to move to I'm just going to bring up on my agenda, item 8.1 on page 6, which is the finance report. And hopefully you can hear us. Mark, good morning, Mark, if you're there. We can't hear you yet, Mark. Just, I think Grayson was working that out. Still can't hear you. How good are you at sign language, Mark? Although I think the finance report might be a little bit tricky with you sign languaging through that. Still can't hear you. You might just want to sing a tune, and then when it does cut in, we'll know you're there.
Very quiet. You can hear him very quietly.
Okay, so maybe it's a volume. There we go.
Oops. Can everyone hear me now?
We've got you now, Mark. I think we're just tweaking things. We had a bit of a dub show going on there.
Well, look, good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone in the room. Through you, it's time just to talk to the finance report. So I will take the report as read. I guess I did want to just highlight some key messages though. First of all, it is the first quarter report. So typically at the end of our first quarter, what we tend to do is sometimes we are a little bit slow out of the starting blocks. So we do typically have a bit of an underspend on our operating expenses. It doesn't represent or doesn't signal a full year savings. It just means that there's just slight temporary differences in terms of when we expect things to be spent. And what we also typically do is, because we've still got 3 quarters of the financial year ahead of us with many challenges and lots of unforeseens, we do tend to be a little bit cautious, and we do tend to forecast that we'll be on full year budget unless there are things that we're absolutely certain about. So what you would have noticed in the report is we have highlighted some additional revenue streams. So as you know, through the participating in tranche 1 of the 3 Waters reform, the council will be receiving $6.2 million from central government, but only $3.1 million of that will be received this financial year. So we've included $3.1 million worth of additional revenue in the financial forecasts, and with that comes $1 million of operating spend and $2.1 million of capex spend. So they net each other off. So the additional work that we'll be doing in the water space is fully funded. So you'll see that in the report, as well as from the PGF, we actually picked up $1 million to 500,000 tranches, which is detailed in the report. Apart from that, I just wanted to highlight, just given the fact that there's been an article about Auckland Council losing $1.4 billion worth of interest, I just wanted to just assure the committee and just talk to that unrealised loss on our financial derivatives. So first and foremost, that is just simply an accounting.
Sorry, Mark, your internet's just cut out there. So yeah.
Can you hear me now? All right.
You're back on now? Yep. There's a bit of suspicion around the table.
Look, I just was talking to the financial derivatives. So it's an accounting valuation that, look, we're only obliged to do it annually. We do it at the year end, and it's simply a measure of the future cost of our swap portfolio compared to the same swaps on the open market at a particular point in time. Just for good measure, we do it quarterly. We don't need to. It's not a cash loss. Interest rates are falling. You would have heard Wayne say in the past that in 2014, if we could purchase a swap of 4%, that was gold dust. Those same swaps are sitting at 0.2% today. So swap portfolio is something that's built up over time. Our treasury management policy requires that 55% of our borrowings must be hedged by way of swaps. We recently reported to the Audit and Risk Subcommittee full compliance for the first quarter. We have a major control limit in place. That means that, and we actually differ from many councils. Our major control limit is that we cannot hedge more than 100% of our current borrowings. And whereas many other councils, it's a forward-looking view. You can hedge up to a certain percentage of your forecast borrowing. So we're not 100% hedged, but we do have a swap portfolio that's been built up over time. And that $822,000 that you're seeing in the report is not a cash loss. It is just a valuation at a point in time. We aren't selling any of our swaps at all. And the other thing that Wayne has also been saying is that in terms of our borrowings, we haven't actually taken on new debt. The rates funded depreciation that we receive, that's what's funding our capex renewals and upgrades. All we're actually doing is refinancing our existing debt through through borrowings, and so we haven't yet had the opportunity to take on lots of cheap debt and not hedge it. So through you, Mr. Chair, those are probably the key points that I wanted to highlight, and I'm more than happy to go to questions.
Thank you, Mark. And just before we move to Councillor Halliday, and just to clarify, you've commented on the derivatives. I think there's 2 or 3 spots within the report that is referred to. I want you just to talk briefly on the point 88, 89 and 90, because I think it's important to probably draw attention to the cost to the organisation around COVID and in responding to that. So maybe if you just want to spend a minute or so just referring to that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly. I'm just going to the paragraph 88, 89 and 90 myself.
It's page 27.
Thank you. So I guess, first of all, through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of the council, as you know, we launched a community support package. Phase 1 was called Sustain, and that ran till the 31st of August. So we obviously had to put a closing date onto that. So our full year report was the first time we tabled for you the cost of that community support package. It has come at a cost. And I guess this page 88, 89, and 90 do refer to the costs. So a lot of the costs are sunk costs. We have reprioritised staff into different functions. And with regards to the costs incurred when the EOC was running, in terms of the legislation, we have been able to seek refunds or reimbursement for some of the costs that the council has incurred. There have been some adjustments. We have been able to claim 13,400, but the big costs to the council have been in terms of rates being deferred for 6 months, as well as non-payment or I guess what we call remission of late rates payment penalties. So it's been a cost in terms of we haven't levied penalties for payment of late rates, and we've had a relatively large, about 120 people have contacted the council and asked for a bit of assistance. So it has come at a cost, but that package has now reached the end of its life, and was well received by the community.
Thank you, Mark. I've got Councillor Halliday first up.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that, Mark. Look, one little question I had in regards to your derivatives. I noticed you've dropped down to 822, like you mentioned, but this time last year it was about 4 million. Does that mean that we're sort of moving through and are going to be able to take advantage of those interest rates soon?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Halliday. That's an excellent question. So it goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier. So the measurement of the unrealised losses or gains on derivatives is at a point in time. So the 4 million that you're referring to was the fair value of our derivatives for the full year for 1920. So it was from 1 July 2019 to 30 June 2020, and that was the new valuation compared to the 30th of June 2019. The value before you today in the report is a 3-month valuation. So that's taking the 822 it's a further reduction in value of 822,000 from 1 July 2020 to 30 September. In terms of being able to take advantage, look, the Treasury management is a complex process that we go through. And as I said, we just aren't taking on new debt at the moment. What we're doing is we're refinancing existing debt as it matures through the pre-funding program, and the rates-funded depreciation is actually funding our renewals and our upgrades so far. And of course, we've got this additional injection of cash from central government. So At this stage, we don't anticipate to be taking huge advantage of the markets at the moment, because we aren't needing to take on lots of new debt, which obviously comes at a lower price.
Councillor Halliday, do you have a further question? I can come back to you if you're not quite ready.
That's great, Mark. Thank you very much for that. I was under the impression that figure I gave was actually for the first quarter of last financial year, but if I stand to be corrected, so my apologies.
I doubt. I know what you're referring to, but I doubt very much that would be just for a quarter, that size of an amount. But certainly you can just follow up on that later with Mark if you need to. Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Mark, just following on from the questions from Councillor Halliday, so my understanding is for the remainder of this financial year, in terms of debt maturity that's going to come back on for us to look at hedging going forward, we're looking at 20 million in May of next year, and then it's 20 million in October and 25 million in May of the following year. So because we are operating at a really high level of hedging, 90.3% I think was what was reported to us in Audit and Risk, we are effectively locked into paying significantly higher interest rates than what the LGFA is issuing as its yields. I think you referenced there's 0.5%. I think the latest, some of the latest longer term stuff has come out at 1.9. I guess my concern is, and this is something that's highlighted in that article you mentioned from the University of Auckland's senior lecturer in accounting, where they're admitting that, hindsight's 2020, but they are raising the flag that local government across the country has been caught out on very high levels of hedging here. So it's not just unique to Kapiti, as you mentioned. It's Auckland does it, Wellington does it. I guess it works in a rising interest rate market, but looking ahead, we're not likely to see that anytime soon with depressed economic conditions for the next 2, 3, 4 years. And in fact, interest rate markets have become somewhat unhinged from economic growth as well, as we've seen since the GFC. So do we actually need to go and revisit Treasury policy to look at what is an appropriate level of hedging to get back down to better manage that interest rate risk in a low interest rate environment? Or do we sort of have to, I guess, suck it up and wait for debt to mature?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Compton. Look, really excellent questions there. There's a number of questions in there, so I hopefully will answer them all. Look, we are, we are heavily hedged. Over 90% is quite a high number. Look, most of the councils do have very similar Treasury management policies. So a minimum hedging value of 55% really does feel right. We've certainly, it's one of the questions that annually we have quite a large meeting at the LGFA where we have 2 independent Treasury advisors. They sort of go head to head and have a bit of a show, basically a bit of a clash. And there are some pretty hard questions, and we were asking exactly that. Should the hedging limits be lowered in light of what's happening with the interest rates? And look, generally speaking, the experts are saying at the moment that 55% is a good minimum to have. As I said, unfortunately, you don't just build a swap book up overnight, and the nature of these, what I would call protection instruments, is you lock into a certain term with the banks. Now the banks never lose, and if you are seeking the lowest swap rates, that normally comes with quite a long duration. So you can't sort of have it all. You can't maximise your protection at least costs. So we are contractually bound to legal contracts with the bank, and certainly what we do now in terms of our decisions is we certainly won't hedge if we need to, if we don't need to hedge, we won't. So we don't have an automatic process of let's draw down debt and let's buy a swap. Particularly with interest rates being so low, our policy is to borrow all our debt on the floating rate. So we do benefit from that, and that's how we bring our cost of capital down. It really does come back to the fact that we aren't actually issuing, the fact that we're over 90% hedged. If we were taking out a lot of new debt, we wouldn't be hedging it, and then that would be an opportunity for us to see that ratio come way down. But the fact of the matter is, we do have a large swap book. Some of those swaps go back 7 or 8 years, and we are bound to that. So every single time we need to issue debt, we take a long, hard look at what is the way that we can maximise or make that debt least cost to the council. So it is not an automatic that we issue debt and take out a swap. In fact, we haven't taken out a swap for a wee while. We're constantly looking at what our borrowings are costing us. There are ways and means of getting our cost of capital down. That's what we call blending and extending. So as the cost of swaps are going down and we're seeing those large unrealised losses, there are opportunities to blend and extend. But unfortunately, the banks never lose. And look, it is a protection that we do need. At some point, interest rates may rise, and a swap book comes into being when interest rates rise. So, but yeah, the fact that we're not 100% hedged is very, very good. And a point of difference for this council is that major control limit that I spoke to earlier, where we will not hedge more than the debt we actually have on our books, and that's what lots of councils do. Our control limit is never to hedge more than 100% of our debt. And every week we look at ways and means of reducing our cost of debt.
Mark, just I'll check with Councillor Compton whether he's got a follow-up, but 2 questions from me just following on from that. We have Standard & Poor's, which reviewed our financial rating. What has their view been on our position around swaps in our funding strategy? And then the second follow-up, which is linked to that, was audit and risk. So we have independents around the table. Was there any concerns raised through audit and risk along the same lines of Councillor Compton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through you, look, insofar as Standard & Poor's are concerned, they obviously look at our treasury management policy. They look to see if we're compliant. They're very, very happy. The fact that we do have a minimum hedging level of 55%, they continue to be comfortable with that. They're also complementary of the major control limit. So in terms of our hedging, they have not issued any concern or expressed concern over the level of our hedging. They are complementary of that major control limit. In terms of the pre-funding program that we operate, where we can pre-fund up to 18 months in advance of debt maturities, they have been extremely complimentary of that. In fact, the fact that our net debt to total operating revenue is below 200%, we have such a strong pre-funding program and we have such a tight treasury management policy has all contributed to the fact that we had that double step up in our credit rating. In terms of the Audit and Risk Subcommittee, the question that we were asked a couple of weeks ago was, given that interest rates are so low, what is it that we're doing to, reduce the cost of debt for our ratepayers? And what we took them through was pretty much what we've said today. There wasn't a specific concern about the unrealised losses on our derivatives, but to be fair, we don't actually report that to the Audit and Risk Subcommittee. We table a separate paper which is all about the treasury management policy and the compliance of maturity buckets, swap buckets, and what we call counterparty risk. So we And it was at that meeting where Wayne explained that, yes, interest rates are really, really, really low. We are driving down our cost of debt. It is there's only a couple of levers that are available to us. It's doing those blends and extends on our swap book. But what is limiting us, and it's a good news story, is the fact that we're not taking out new debt for new projects at the moment. It's been funded by rates, and we're refinancing existing debt.
Thanks very much, Mark. I just want to check with Councillor Compton whether you had any further questions.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. It was the Chair, Brian Jackson, who was asking about the 3.9 weighted average cost of funds and how that could get brought down, because he made the comment that it is high compared to what the market is at the moment. So on the weighted average cost of funds, so that refers back to in terms of that the 0.88 percentage point gap, that refers to the annual plan in terms of where we're trying to get what the savings are measured against. That figure is drawn from the previous long-term plan, or does that get specifically updated each annual plan? That original, whatever it was, about 4.8, I think.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes. So in terms of our long-term plan, we make assumptions which are heavily audited. So we have to assume what our weighted average cost of borrowings will be for the 20-year period. And through our annual plan process as well, as we also revisit that, and we look at that when we determine our annual plans year on year.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Gwen. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you very much. Mark, look, I do have a question that just relates to the statement you've just made, that it is good news that we are funding capital expenditure through rates, not through taking out further debt. As we're going forward into the LTP, I'm a little bit concerned that...
Councillor Elliott, I'll let you continue on, but what I heard Mr DeHaas say, and Mark, you can correct me here, was the good news story was we weren't taking out new debt.
Yeah.
But I might be wrong, and it wasn't about that we're so much around the funding of the rates, but the fact that we weren't taking on additional debt. Mark, do you want to clarify that?
Can I just finish my question?
Okay, I'll allow you to finish it, and then Mark can clarify.
So, Mark, I just wanted to ask you, going forward into the LTP and the number of, some of them are quite significant, but the number of capital works projects we're looking at, would it not be prudent with current interest rates to actually do a little bit more borrowing to fund those, considering how low the interest rates are? And does that mean a change in our strategy?
Mr. Chair, thank you. So yes, in terms of my earlier comments, what I was saying is if we were trying to drive down our cost of debt by just taking on more debt, that wouldn't be great, because if we were driving the cost of debt down, we'd be having a lot more debt on the books. In terms of Councillor Elliott's question, look, there's obviously many discussions still to have through our long-term plan workshop. At this stage, in terms of the financial strategy, whilst the LGFA have increased the borrowing covenants, net debt to operating revenue for the next 2 financial years are up to 300%. It was 250, and then it ratchets down back to 280% for in year 6. Our financial strategy, as it stands, is it's keeping that at 200%. As we work through the planned CapEx program for the next few years, the financial strategy will need to be agile to accommodate the projects that the councillors decide that they do want to do. Look, the fact of the matter is that debt is very, very cheap at the moment, and particularly it's cheap through the LGFA, but it all has to be repaid at some point. So when you take on more debt, it's higher interest costs, and higher interest costs means higher rates. So financial strategy has got those 3 levers for a reason. It's rates, it's CapEx, and it's borrowings, and it all needs to be carefully looked at in unison, and that's what we'll be doing through the long-term plan determination and all the workshops.
Thank you, Mark. And just to build on that, essentially staff will bring that advice back to the table, and elected members will have to deliberate over that and make that very decision that you've raised, Councillor Elliott, around the balance between debt and rates, and actually the size of the capital works program, rates funding and so forth. That's correct, Mark?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's 100% correct.
Councillor Elliott, did you have a follow-up? Thanks, Jackie. All right, team. Councillor Halliday, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. And sorry, Mark, just wanted to get clarity just while we're on this topic. On page 21, the graph number 69, I might be reading this wrong, but it seems to show a increase in our debt on that graph, on our net debt. That you said we've taken out no borrowings as such. I was just wondering why would seem to be increasing from 2018 through to 2021. I appreciate the final two are actually projections.
So, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Halliday. I'm on paragraph 69, and we're looking at the chart for paragraph 69, and what it's showing is it's showing our the blue bar is our net borrowings, and the grey bar is cash and deposits. So, look, generally speaking, if you look at there's been there has been a slight increase in net debt. So the key point of this chart is the green line. What that's showing the readers of the report is that our net debt is below the green line. It's a very large scale on the left-hand side. Basically, the first check is saying that our financial strategy provides that our net debt must be below 200%, which is the green line. The orange line has been increased to 300%. That's the maximum allowable as per our Treasury management policy, as well as the LGFA interim borrowing covenants. Now, when you look at this chart, you do need to take into account our pre-funding activity. So the blue bars have raised, ever so slightly, as raised by Councillor Halliday, but it all depends on what's happening. So when we do lots of pre-funding, the impact to net debt is actually zero, because you're taking on debt, but you're putting it into a term deposit account, so you've got the cash. So whilst your borrowings go up, you've got the cash, so the net debt, it cancels each other off. The slight lifting in the bars there just really depends on the timing of debt maturity. So we've got two big ones, one coming up over the foreseeable time. So the slight uplift there will be because of some debt maturities. But generally speaking, over the last 3 years, our net debt has held steady at around about the 155 million mark.
Thanks, Mark. And I think the other point to make, and again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, the gross debt on that chart is steady right across those 3 financial years. So that's
through you, Mr. Chair, that's exactly right.
All right. I don't see any further questions from elected members. We have the recommendations on page 28, recommendations 97 and 98. Do we have anyone, Councillor Halliday? Okay, sure. 2 more questions from Councillor Halliday.
My apologies, through Mr. Chair. We started off the conversation on derivatives as such, and that sort of grew from there. I thought we might have been walking through the report as such. Look, I had a couple of questions. With regards to page 7, we have the table there. It's got personal maintenance and operations with a figure there. I think we might have mentioned this before, but is there any chance of breaking that down further in future reports? Because personnel and maintenance sort of lumped in as a general expense. I don't know, but I'd be quite liking to know what our personnel cost is in relation to having that separate from our maintenance and potentially our operations as well.
So through you, Mr. Chair, look, this is a question that has come up a few times in terms of how we're actually reporting it is consistent with how we produce our statutory financial statements in our annual report. We have, I guess what we do try and do is we try and keep consistency. So in terms of the way in which we present it through our quarterly reports is the same as when you then see the annual report. The annual report has the benefit of the notes to the accounts. So what we do try and do is in the commentary, as we do explain the key variances, as we go through the financial year, where the variance relates specific to personnel, we do provide the detail. It's just given that it's the first quarter of the financial year, and there are typically those temporary timing differences. That's the narrative that you've received in the report. So, when our personnel, our maintenance and operations require more detail, we do actually provide that in the report.
Thank you, Mark. Another question I had was in relation to page 15, number 37, the water account. I note that we're currently in surplus. Just a point of clarity, when we were exploring the setting of the rates, there was going to be a portion allocated to bring this back in the green. As it turns out, that wasn't required. Is that correct?
So through you, Mr. Chair. So paragraph 37, you're absolutely right. We are back in the surplus. Look, it really does depend on the water consumed. So for the current financial year, we held both the fixed charge for water and the variable price for water. We held that steady. We've had a water account deficit for a number of years. So we've been fortunate that we have gone into surplus. It's been one of our strategies to slowly claw back the deficits that we've had. The water account is the closed account, so any surpluses will be used to reduce the costs of supplying water. For every annual plan and for the long-term plan, there's lots of modelling that's done on water consumption. So, it really is. It is what it is, and we are tracking ahead of our expectations in terms of getting to a surplus. But
Mark, if I could just add to that, if we had a following year where there was a deficit and you had a slight surplus, then obviously we need to have some provision for that as well. So arguably that could happen as well, couldn't it?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Look, absolutely. Look, Sean may want to expand, but our intention is not to have huge surpluses. Surpluses are used to offset costs of providing the service. It is a closed water account, and the surpluses go back into our costs. So, and you're right. It is based on consumption, and surpluses will offset unforeseen deficits in the future.
And through you, Mr. Chair, well, I appreciate what you're saying. We actually have increased both the variable and fixed charge over the last 3 or 4 years, each consecutive year. And I'm assuming that's to get to a balancing point where it is covered. It's fantastic that we've actually got there, I think, 3 years ahead of schedule. My hope is, and I'm assuming this will get picked up in the long-term plan and the rates fixing, is that we potentially won't actually have to increase that price anymore. That might be able to be stabilised at that point. I guess that's where I was heading with that conversation.
Thanks, Councillor Halliday. And I think we've had this discussion before. We're in a perfect world. If you knew what the consumption would be, you'd set the rate and there'd be no surplus and no deficit. But the fact is we don't know what the weather will bring and how much people will use. So there will always be some variables. Did you have any further, or was that your last one? All right, team. We're getting through. We just got the recommendations again on page 28, I think it was. If someone would like to move, Councillor Holbrow, moving recommendation 97 and 98. Councillor Elliott seconded. Right of introduction.
Yeah, just to thank you, Mark, for this report. It's very clearly laid out, really easy to understand, and certainly those of us who attended your workshops earlier in the year, it's really helped to provide some clarity around the background to some of this information. So thanks for the work that you've done this year.
Thank you.
Councillor Compton, are you open to debate now?
Thank you. Just an interesting development that's happened while we've been sitting here is that Auckland Council's gone from 1.4 billion to 2.7 billion in terms of their unrealised losses on their derivatives, and that's even on the back of they just issued $500 million in green bonds in the last few weeks at an interest rate of 2.95%, I think. So I think, thinking back to recently, we had Sharon Zollner here at the business breakfast, and she was making a really important point that the way monetary policy has moved in the 12 years since the global financial crisis is all the assumptions that we've made previously have become unhinged from each other. So previously, you would, if you lowered interest rates, you might get inflation moving. You know, those things were linked, and that's hasn't been the case because there is so much cheap money awash in the system now. New Zealand had been somewhat insulated to that up until this year. So I think there's a case to be made, notwithstanding Standard & Poor's record on this where they're saying that the risks are appropriate. I think there is a case to be made that the game is changing in this space. And you just have to look at what's happening in Auckland. You have to look at what's happening around the rest of the country where we've been caught out by thinking the same way that we have done prior to the global financial crisis, and that sort of approach is carried over post it. But actually the financial world is operating in a quite different way because we've never seen this much money being printed around the world, and it's having a profound impact on the way that interest rates are working. It's having a profound way on the way that inflation is failing to budge at all, despite unless you own a house. So I think there's an opportunity, and it's a local government sector issue. It's not just Kapiti Coast District Council, I should make the point here, because the whole sector is caught out in this situation as well. So that's something that I'd like to see get revisited possibly through LGNZ, or that if they have a look at it, or if LGFA can look at it in more detail, because I think it is an important issue. There's no easy answer to it, and it's not going to impact the report we've got here today, but I think it's something just worth noting that we need to revisit, and accepting the fact that because of the position that we're in, and same with Auckland Council and others, where we do have, as Mark said, a large swap book, we're not going to extricate ourselves from the situation in any time soon, but we do need to be cognizant of the fact that if we're paying, 1 or 2 percentage points, 100 or 200 basis points above what LGFA is technically offering it to us, that's in the order of $100,000 or $200,000 more in interest costs that we're paying than what we could be paying. So there is that balance. Acknowledging that had interest rates gone up, we would have been better protected. But actually, we've been in this situation of interest rates being static or falling now for the best part of at least a decade overall. So, I think there is scope for this to be revisited at some point, happily. But notwithstanding the fact that, I'll still be supporting the report, but yeah. I think that's worth noting.
Thanks, Councillor Compton. I don't have any other names up on the screen, so I'll just chip in here a little bit, and certainly don't disagree with your comments, if I could be really clear, but also just adding, having sat around the table, have seen similar reports where we've seen advantages through the swap rates, and so it's taking that long-term view. If we looked at it over a space of 10 years, we've certainly been on top, I'd say, if that's fair to say, Mark. Rather than losing out. Notwithstanding that, though, I think your point around Councillor Compton's point around reviewing the current state of the economy, both nationally and globally, is a prudent thing to do. But I'm sure Mark and his team are doing that. And also maybe Councillor Compton, something to raise through audit and risk again. I know they do deep dives on particular topics as well, and just keeping a watching brief on that. So, Sean.
If I could just add, sorry, Mr. Chair, so the financial strategy will obviously come back through as part of the LTP process, and you will have ample opportunity to review that through that process and look at all of those issues that relate back to our financial position, and the forward works program capital-wise will again form part of that conversation as well.
Thanks, Sean. And Mark, I might just take this offline with you moving forward, just so that we've captured some of the comments that Councillor Compton's made and look at how we focus on that moving forward, so that it's not so much addressed, but it's just we look into that. So, Councillor Elliott, I've got you up next.
Look, thank you, Mark, for your report, and I just want to commend Councillor Compton, on your analysis. It's really, really valuable that you bring this opinion and up-to-date information to this table. Thank you. It's very much appreciated.
Over those remarks.
Thanks, Councillor Randall. So with that, we've got recommendations 97 to 98. Shaking your head, and now I realise why. It's a right of reply. Has been waived. I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, and that is carried. Thank you. And just noting, Gwyn, I will come back with Mark over that and just see how we move that forward. So, team, I'm just going to flick back to the top and see where we're at. I know that we've jumped around a little bit. So we have been through item 8.1. Mark, if you're still there, thank you very much. I know you need to slip away to another engagement. Appreciate you chipping in. Have you got anything further to add through the rest of the report? I just want to jump to conclusions that you're done.
No.
Oh, you're freezing up there. It's the derivatives. All right. We'll
we absolutely will be looking at that because, we as officers, we agree.
Thank you, Mark. Now, look, are you sticking around for anything further? I know you've got another engagement. If not, thank you very much for joining us.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, I just have to briefly go offline at 11 a.m. But yes, there's a few more papers that my team will be tabling, so I will be present for those.
Okay. Thanks very much, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, team. So look, we've been through item number 8.1, 8.2 and 8.3. So moving on to 8.4, which is the policy work program update on page 43. And welcome back up to the table again, Hamish. So page 43, team. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the regular update we do on a policy work program. You might all remember back in July, you received the first quite large update, particularly following COVID. It was quite important to catch up on where things were at, and also obviously understanding some of the impacts that we've had at that time. So quite a big report there, and this is similarly the next iteration following up on where progress across the policy work program is at. So we have a number of updates in the current report. There's been a number of changes to some of the timeframes around some of the projects in there, as well as a number of completions we've undertaken. Not to say that there's still some remaining impacts from that COVID and coming out of that and how we engage. We're still working through. But also in that we've had some key new pieces of work undertaken and completed, like the recovery plan was added following our last discussion, and is also one of our new additions that we're proposing into the new year for the review of that as one of the items logged on there. So looking to otherwise take the report as read, and happy to take questions you may have.
Thank you, Hamish. And I see that Councillor McCann's up first. If you do have some questions, just pop your name down on the screen. We do have the recommendations found on page 48 for reference. So, Councillor McCann.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. I know that we have had a number of discussions at Council about a local alcohol policy. I can't see that in this paper. Is that just going to be updated? I may have... Oh, well, I must have...
It's currently on hold in the report.
So, given that we have had a discussion and we were informed by staff that it was put back in the work program, is it just that this paper needs to be updated, or...?
The review work of the local alcohol policy was in the work program as part of the changes and the beach bylaw work. It had been put on hold, and I think it was signalled in the July piece of work, and in here on page 46 as well, it's still identified as being on hold, but that work around the initial scoping is due to resume in April 2021, subject to the beach bylaw work being completed, is what the intentions are around the policy work program at this point in time.
Thank you. I've got a few more questions, Mr. Chair, if that's okay. On page 46, number 5, subdivision, it says that work is still on hold, and this might be less of a question, more of an observation. But is that work going to start again, considering the extensive work that needs to occur in the whole housing sector? Just concerned that it says it's on hold. And
Handing that one over to Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So is that the subdivision development principles and requirements review, number 5? Yeah, so that absolutely is. We're currently looking at resourcing that to get it started, hopefully before Christmas in terms of the project, and then run through into next financial year.
so it keeps cutting me off. It's not noted in the report, Mr. Chair. Is there something we can do to ensure that that is noted in the minutes, or?
Yeah, I can't actually. It may be on the table on page 49. But if on the electronic version, I'm not sure if you can see. I can't actually pick it up on my hard copy.
It looks
but if
like
it isn't,
an
we can.
explanation of derivatives there. Can't read any of it.
We can certainly note or amend that to reflect that there is starting up again.
Thank you. Obviously, there's a lot of concern in things like tiny houses. We know from the initial discussions that it is very hard to fit that type of work into our current policy, and we have a housing crisis, and we know that each one of those tiny homes does free up another resident. So I would urge that there is some urgency within that. Sorry, I've lost my place, so if I can come back a little bit later.
We've just got Natasha that's going to provide some more feedback.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I just wanted to clarify in terms of what that document does. It's quite a technical document that sets out what our engineering requirements are for subdivisions, subdivision and development. So it won't necessarily make any difference from the tiny homes type perspective. I think what you're thinking about there is probably more related to rules and requirements in the district plan. So we've just got to be clear around what achieves what.
So Natasha, maybe just in the interest of that, if it's not too much work, an email could just be circulated around just briefly on clarifying what that particular piece of work is doing, and just maybe noting that it is restarting, as Sean has said, in December, and then that will at least clarify that for elected members. Councillor McCann, did you found your other bit? Otherwise, I'll go to Councillor Elliott. Councillor Elliott?
Hi, I have got a question around a freedom camping bylaw review. The report notes that it, and I'm just trying to see what number it is, that it is on hold. However, it also says that there has been some recent discussion within council. Paragraph 17 on page 47 says the freedom camping bylaw is not currently on the policy work program. However, there's been some discussion around this in recent times. And so generally that was a rather big piece of work that would require renewing every 2 years, reviewing. Those discussions have been quite fruitful in that now it's looking more like a freedom camping policy amendment, which is a far smaller piece of work. And on that basis, I'm really interested in it being put, at least a window being put back on the policy work program for this, especially given Council were just successful in a grant application from the Government for Responsible Camping this 2020-2021 summer season, and part of our application that we were successful for was $18,300 funding specifically for policy work and data collection and surveys to assist council planning for future seasons. So, and on those grounds, I would like to appeal for your support table to have that policy amendment put onto the work program.
So if I could just check with staff first, because we need to be careful what we add on. If you note with referenced into the report that anything that's added to the program would need sufficient resourcing, notwithstanding the comment that you made around the government funding, and we need some clarification around that. Because if I refer to the local alcohol policy that Councillor McCann raised, those of you will know that I put a notice of motion to the community board to request that that be progressed in a sense as soon as possible. I would have done that sooner if it wasn't for resourcing in the sense of waiting for the beach bylaw. So Natasha, if I can see you're nodding there, just to maybe respond, maybe help clarify, because actually just lastly, having been around the discussion around the table previously, and I don't profess to be an expert on it, the thought at the time is that we had enough tools in the toolbox to allow for that camping requirements that people wanted without having a bylaw per se, but over to you.
Look, thanks very much. So there's a couple of things I think probably. Firstly, I will look to get an email circulated around to elected members in terms of clarifying the funding, because we have been successful with some funding, and I think it might be useful for elected members to understand what their funding's been, what the full range of funding has been allocated for. And the other thing is the current policy work program, you'll notice, from 2018 to 2021. So it might be appropriate to suggest instead that the freedom camping, whether or not it's a policy amendment or a bylaw, is something which is considered as part of that wider refresh of the policy work program going forward that will be undertaken next year.
Sorry, just Councillor, I will come back to you. So, Natasha, the issue that I have today is potentially without a little bit of an outline around that information, it would be difficult to make a decision on the request that Councillor Elliott has made. Essentially, Councillor Elliott is saying that there is funding that's been received, and that would help facilitate the request that she has.
So there's no resource available to do that work, as you pointed out. In order to, if elected members think that that's a sufficient priority, we would need to be deprioritising a different piece of work which is currently underway in order to allocate priority to put it on this policy work program. The other option, as I mentioned, was that when we review the full policy work program and develop a policy work program that goes out to 2024, the next sort of 3-year policy work program, we can look at having that prioritisation conversation as part of that work.
Thank you. Councillor, Sean, and then I'll come back to Councillor Elliott.
Just sort of add to Natasha's comments around the funding. My understanding that funding has already been allocated to specific works, and that data capturing aspect and policy development relates to the data that you might use at some point in time in the future to advise a policy, so would not be developing the policy in terms of the funding. So the resourcing issue is, as per paragraph 17, talks about the inability to look at that in the current program and would need to be factored in to either remove something from that program as part of that review in the future or add resources to develop it.
Councillor Allen, I'm going to come back to you in a second, but I just want to frame something for you to think about. I know from our offline discussions your intention is around enabling domestic tourism, camping and so forth on the Kapiti Coast. What I'm looking at here from the staff is whether the tools that we have in the toolbox currently will enable that, because from what I can gather, Councillor Elliott's request to do that work and have that freedom camping bylaw or amendment is to allow for that domestic tourism. So Councillor, if I can just hand it over to you, if you want to clarify that, because it might help inform staff and elected members around the why behind what you're requesting. So over to you now.
So generally our policy is good, but when you're talking to industry, there are a few really small things that make it really, really quite difficult. One is that maximum times in Kapiti for anyone to stay here are only 24 hours, except for one campsite at Otaki Beach, or one site where you can stay for 48 hours. A policy review would enable a longer an amendment would enable a window for a longer stay at some point in the future in a non-urban site for those that actually want to stay and spend their money in Kapiti and actually relax and enjoy everything that we have to offer, not just arrive and within 24 or 48 hours have to arrive, settle in, feed the kids, go to bed, wake up, pack up and leave, which is exactly what our rules are saying now. The other big thing is that our current policy requested states a $20,000 fine for anyone who breaches the current rules in the bylaw, which is completely out of whack with everything else in the country. And it's been proposed, and I have talked to the regulatory department staff. I've talked to our previous GM of Spaces and Places about this, and we've talked to the Mayor about this, and we've talked to the industry about this, and established that just changing that to $200 or something which is more enforceable and reasonable is a really, really common sense thing to do.
So, Councillor Elliott,
talking about a few. You just asked me to explain.
No. Look, I'm just checking with you. I haven't stopped you. I just wanted to clarify.
Basically, that's it. There's maybe one or two more tweaks that we can discuss. That also potentially wouldn't need too much in the way of consultation.
Okay, thank you. So, Natasha, if I could just come at you, because I don't want this to be debate, and that's why I just wanted to pause Councillor Elliott there for a second, because if you do want to put that to the table, then I'll allow the appropriate in terms of you moving recommendations with that added, see how it goes to the table. But in terms of addressing the issue, what Councillor Elliott has raised, does that need an amendment or a review of the freedom camping policy?
So what we have at the moment is we don't have a bylaw. We do have a policy, and that does create some challenges with enforcement. So we would currently have no ability to enforce a fine of any amount because it's the bylaw. It's a bylaw that would give you those powers. The timeframes are set out in a policy. So if there was a desire to change those timeframes, that could be done through a policy amendment. However, the other thing to bear in mind, based on what I've said around enforcement, is the policy itself is generally permissive and the legislation is permissive because we don't have a bylaw which restricts where people can freedom camp. What we've also are very conscious of from the feedback we get through service requests is there are some sectors of our community which are not particularly tolerant of wanting increases in freedom camping, particularly at some sites. And I know that's why Councillor Elliott, you referred to some of the more rural sites.
So, Councillor Elliott, we're in question time. Well, if you want to still pursue elected members to consider your request, then that will come through if you move recommendations. Do you have any further questions? And if not, I'll move to Councillor Halliday.
Just to say that, yes, look, I would like to move a recommendation. I think it'll be a 31.2. However, I can seek advice on that. Look, Natasha, I totally agree with you, is that there are people who...
Councillor, can I just check, is it a question? Because I don't want to get into debate between elected members and staff.
Yeah,
I can come back to you if you've got a question later.
Could you just agree that, we don't have a workable bylaw, nor do we need to go into that work, and it takes a lot of effort and energy to maintain a bylaw. But wouldn't you agree that this is a really perfect time that the rest of the country is taking advantage of without the overseas tourists to make those tweaks to our policies and the way we work that will enable far better, safer tourism?
Councillor, I'm going to need to move on. Councillor Halliday?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. Just wanted to bring your attention to page 47, number 15. The solid waste bylaw was expected to come to us and be presented at Council on the 26th of November. Just aware that that's now a cancelled meeting. We're now doing the submissions, and I was just wondering whether that's going to come. The intent is that, how urgent is this, and will that be coming to us before Christmas?
Just handing over to Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Yes, so that has been moved to, I think it's the meeting of the 10th, so it will be coming before Christmas.
Cool. Yep, through you again, Mr. Chair. I'm just a little bit concerned about the strategy for supporting the arts being put on hold, and I'll defer to Councillor Holborough, Janet, with regards to that. But is this a policy that has its 10-year review, because it was last done in 2012, and it's the reason why it's being pushed out? Is that due to resourcing in relation to it having a little bit of a breathing space in this?
Councillor Halliday, appreciate it's a question, and we'll come to staff but so that we kill two birds with one stone. Did you have anything to add to it, Councillor? Thank you. Darren?
For the Chair, in terms of resources within the arts team and making sure that there's appropriate resources to do that work effectively.
which partly therein lies the issue. We've, say for example, you wanted to request that be prioritised as well, similar to Councillor Elliott's request. You know, it goes back to the Chief Executive's comments through the LTP workshops about how far and how fast. And if we want more work to be done and progress it, we've got to adequately fund and resource that. So, and I'm not saying that that's what you're saying, but this is another example. The staff report refers to requesting long-term funding to begin the work. So did you have any further?
Again, it was just more clarifying whether that was a result of that, and because we've got the 2012 date there, is that one that is reviewed every 10 years?
So yeah, is that one reviewed every 10 years? Is it a set time frame?
I'm not aware. I don't think so. It just comes down to capacity, as I understand it.
Thank you, Darren. Martin, did you have any further?
No.
Councillor Holborough, sorry, did you have something to add?
If that's appropriate.
If it's on the same topic, because I've got Councillor Pravanov. Okay, Councillor Holborough and then Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, there are certainly huge challenges with capacity within the arts team, delivering the arts trail and all the other work that goes on. And this would have to be a piece of work that was very thoroughly consulted on with our arts community, with the arts community being very vibrant at the moment. In the meantime, I think we're supporting the arts pretty well, but certainly that strategy is out of date, and it would be good to do it in the next year or two.
Thanks, Janet. Councillor Pravanov. I'm getting good at your name, aren't I?
Yes, you're doing very well. Thank you. So my question is, when the Public Places Bylaw was reviewed a number of years ago, yourself and the other councillors who were around the table at that time made a decision not to develop a freedom camping bylaw and set it as a policy. Can you or anyone else give any reasons why it was left as a policy? Because I know that there was a lot of discussion around making it a bylaw and it was decided not to.
And ironically, your ward councillor was one of the ones leading that.
And I was behind
Natasha, did you want to add in terms of or is it more appropriate from an elected member perspective around was this table that made the decision? My recollection was that there was sufficient tools within the toolbox to address the issues around signage, parking numbers, and so forth, rather than go through the work and effort and actual, I guess, the divided views around freedom camping bylaws at the time. But I'll just hand it over to you, Ed.
Yeah, that's correct. And I also think at the time it wasn't seen as being a significant issue for the district, so it was responding to the central government policy direction in the new legislation without imposing something very constraining in the district.
Hamish is just going to add something to that.
Sorry, I recalled, I think we were referring to the 2019 discussion a few years back, but that was also in light of the time that there was a range of discussions going on across the sectors, the local government, freedom camping sector with the government, and they're also considering a range of responses to better manage freedom camping, now called responsible camping, at that time. And that has then led to a number of things coming out of the government, including, or it was a range of recommendations going back to the government, of which one of the responses they did was the funding that's available that we've now accessed, but there was a range of other recommendations that went back to government as well. That are still open as far as I'm aware about changes.
So I think the key thing is that Natasha made the comment that basically a policy has no teeth, and so you might have a policy but you can't actually enforce anything.
Thank you. Did you have any further questions?
No, thank you.
And Councillor Elliott.
I was just going to answer Councillor Pravanov's question as well, as I was part of that decision making.
Yeah, look, it's 11 o'clock, and so we're not late in the day, so I'm going to allow that. But if I could just ask you to be succinct with your response.
Councillor, part of the reason was because there is a requirement to upgrade a bylaw every 2 years, which is a significant piece of problem work for staff. And also we discovered that areas like Rotorua still have really wonderful responsible camping without with only running on a policy, and that it works very well with an ambassador program and things which we're also using here.
Yeah, look, Sean just needs to clarify something there.
Sorry, just with regard to bylaws, if the legislation requires a review if it's a new bylaw after 5 years, if it's an existing bylaw that is reviewed or refreshed, then it's a 10-year review period. So the statutory requirement is 10 years for an existing bylaw. If it's a brand new one, then you're required to review that in 5 years, then you move to a 10-year cycle.
Thanks, Sean. So, team, we've had a pretty good crack at this paper. I don't see any other names up on the screen. So I just want to do one last scan around the table. Is there any further questions out of this report? No. Councillor Elliott, I want to come back to you because I'm happy for you to move a motion to see if there's support around the table. But before I do that, I want to just check with staff whether there's a practical solution to the issues that Councillor Elliott's raised around encouraging camping in Kapiti without the need to put that to a vote around creating a bylaw and so forth. So
it's not about encouraging as much as it's enabling the council to enforce better. We can't enforce a $20,000 fine as practically as we can enforce a $200 one.
Sure.
So it's simply not about enabling more. It's
yeah, Councillor, I'm trying to work with you on this. So, staff, do you have anything further to add, or do we just look to? Oh, Councillor Buswell has a question as well. I'll move to Councillor Buswell and then I'll come back to staff just to see if there is a response. And if there isn't, then I'm going to allow Councillor Elliott to. She's already signalled she wants to move the recommendations. Councillor Buswell.
I would just like some clarification around the funding because, if it was the government's intent to give local authorities funding to better resource freedom camping policies or bylaws, then if we have been granted some funding to do so, then why can't we do that, basically? So I just want some clarity around the actual fund, what the purpose of it is, and if we have got it, then we should use it for the purpose it was intended to.
Natasha's just going to respond.
So the fund is one that councils could apply for a range of different purposes, including infrastructure such as toilets and things like that at campsites around their districts. It is also things that could be used for things like monitoring of sites, cleaning of sites, other facilities. And that's where most of our funding has been allocated to. So we haven't been given funding to develop a policy. We've been given it to look at hiring responsible camping ambassadors, cleaning and maintaining and managing sites during the peak season. And I'm happy to provide some more information about that to councillors.
Okay, so before we move to Councillor Elliott, if you could provide that, which I know we've already requested via email, that would be helpful. I have a question. Assuming that Councillor Elliott will still put a motion to the table or in addition to the recommendations, if that is voted on by councillors, how would that be funded? If councillors were to vote for that and support it, how will it be funded or delivered? What is the process?
I go back to what I said before. We don't have any resources in order to be able to progress that at this point in time. So, councillors should also be considering what they would then be deprioritising in order to free up resourcing for that work.
I'm going to come back to that to Sean, but I'm going to just hear from Councillor Pravanov first. Okay, so Sean, just noting that, because I don't want to, I'm going to allow Councillor Elliott to put the motion, but I'm cognizant of the fact that if elected members vote on it and for it, essentially there's no decision around deprioritising something. So talk me through the process in terms of how we would respond to that specific request.
So the report I get that you have in front of you today is very clear about the lack of capacity to develop or do any further additional work within that freedom camping area. And understanding what Councillor Elliott is proposing in terms of a recommendation, we wouldn't be able to provide you advice as to what that might mean other than on the surface, we would have to stop something to allow that work to be picked up and taken forward. But we would also need to have some time to understand what the scale and extent of that work might mean in terms of what would need to be stopped. It may be that 2 or 3 things need to be stopped to do that work. So there isn't enough information in front of me today here or in front of the council in this report to allow us to respond to that recommendation, other to say that we wouldn't be able to continue with the current work program.
Thank you, Sean. So, Councillor Elliott, like I said here, I'm trying to work with you on this. We've got recommendations 28 through to 31.1. Are you happy to move the recommendations through there either as a whole or as separate blocks, and then put your proposed request at 31.2? If you're not, then I will look to another elected member to move those, and then...
Thanks, Mr Chair. Look, I'm happy to move those except for 31.1, which I would just like to move a 31.1 and an additional 31.2.
So I don't see the point in you not moving 31.1. If you're looking at moving 31.2 as the freedom camping one, I would suggest you move 28 through to 31.1. And then the addition, and I think we vote on that, and then a 31.2, which is the freedom camping, we'll vote on that separately. If I could just check from staff that that's the appropriate way forward. So are you happy to move recommendations 28 through to 31.1? Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor McCann. Right of introduction.
Just one of those ever so slightly uncomfortable times when elected members and councillors, decision makers take the tiller and have a few special requests that reflect special times. And put our own additions to a program like this that does very, very clearly drive directions that the council is going in. And I would like to thank staff for putting this together. It's been recognising it's been a very difficult quarter, it's been a very difficult year, and everything has had to be changed constantly. So thanks for staying so fluid and so agile, and thank you for putting this paper together.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Any further discussion on the recommendations? Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Mr Chair. Look, I just wanted to just comment with regards to the supporting the arts strategy. In regards to, I just want to make sure that we're not sending a message to the arts community that we are putting things on hold. I appreciate Councillor Holborough's comments with regards to that there's a lot of good work going in there. I just didn't want this to be a negative signal to them, so just ensuring that that positive forward movement in that space is being enhanced as well, which is great. With regards to freedom camping conversation, I actually really like the terminology moving away from freedom camping to responsible camping. And I think it's prudent to note that the current new minister has voiced that he wants to get rid of camping vans that don't have toilet facilities, which I think is in the underlying problem, because what I would like to see us doing is encouraging New Zealanders to participate in what I think has been a situation where we feel ourselves it's a right to be able to responsibly camp, if you like, but that terminology has really taken an awful twist with regards to our environment. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing that being tweaked up. I'm not too sure whether this is the appropriate place or whether it's the appropriate place to have the debate in regards to Councillor Elliott's
next one on the next motion.
I might wait till then because it's just around tweaking policy and that sort of scenario, which I'd like to ask some questions about.
I don't see any further names up on the screen, so I'm going to put that to the vote. We are voting on the recommendations 28 through to 31.1, and then we will consider an additional recommendation from Councillor Elliott. So all those, right of reply, Councillor Elliott, but just reminding you this isn't about the freedom camping. Yeah. So all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. That is carried. Councillor Elliott, do you have a motion that you want to put for 31.2? And if you could just read it out slowly so Grayson can capture it.
Recommendation 31 has an opening statement, with 31.1 being the Capity Recovery Plan review with an expected completion date of November 2021. I would add 31.2, a freedom camping policy review with an expected completion date, maybe May 2021, or maybe earlier. I'd say May. No, it's a policy. We can keep the dates out and just have 31.2 freedom camping policy review.
So I'm just going to wait till we can see that on the screen so we know what we're actually voting for. If that's possible, Grayson, that is possible. I do want to just check with staff whether there's any. I appreciate it's an elected member's motion, but I want to make sure if we've got one, we've got it right. Is there any feedback based on the motion that's been requested? We are still waiting for it to come up on the screen. We are a DEM services person down, so no feedback? Okay. So I think, Grayson, we just Councillor Elliott.
So just I guess a couple of points. Firstly, in terms of the wording, the May 21 timeframe would not be realistic for such a piece of work. So it might be better to leave a timeframe out at this point. The other alternative, it may be, given what we've talked about in terms of resourcing and the need to, if there was a desire to proceed with this, then there's a need for a subsequent decision around what to deprioritise. Is it may be more appropriate for us to actually come back, for recommendation to be around us coming back with a further paper around some recommendations around that.
Thank you, Natasha, for that, because that's what I was looking at, in the sense I can see if it is voted on, like in past, and I'm not saying it will be, but if it is, it doesn't have the second part to that around how was it funded or what's deprioritised. So for me, it's kind of like it's not closed off. So the wording there, we're just looking at freedom camping policy review, and we're removing the completion date, Grayson. Okay, Sean, sorry,
I was just comments. If that motion is adopted, we would need to bring a report back, obviously, to this table to get direction as to what work would need to be stopped and where the resourcing would be provided to deliver that potential review. And at the moment, the work program-wise, it would not be able to do that in advance of Christmas. So we'd need to have a look at how or when we might be able to bring that back at some point in time in the new year.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Buswell, I'm just thinking in terms of standing orders and procedure. Have you got a question?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the question?
My question is to what you've just said, Sean, in regards to coming back with further information. With that, can we have it very well descriptive as to what the grant has been allocated for?
Councillor Elliott, Councillor.
Yes, but your understanding is different to what we've just heard from staff, so that's why I want it to be clarified.
Absolutely. So I expect Natasha will forward that information as soon as she's able to. and absolutely that would be reaffirmed as part of any report that would come back to the table.
Okay, so we're moving on, team, because it's 11:15. Councillor Elliott, we have the motion as it is on the screen, 31.2 Freedom Camping Policy Review. I'm going to give you the right of introduction. We'll then move into... Sorry, we need a seconder first. So Councillor Elliott's moved. I think Councillor Pravanov was signalling no. Okay. Councillor Buswell is seconding that recommendation. And so right of introduction, Councillor Elliott, then we'll move to a vote.
Look, thank you. It's been a bit of a journey for some of us to get this to the table thus far. That journey has been via the Mayor's Office, has been tracking work on this policy review and the need for it. Obviously, when the policy was written, we were in a far different landscape tourism-wise, and it was a scary landscape. There was a lot of damage being done environmentally across the country through over-tourism, domestic tourism wasn't a biggie, but now domestic tourism is a huge part of where we're going to be getting our dollar in the future. And part of some of the people wanting to make use of that are the 85,000 Kiwis who own motorhomes and who want to be able to come and stay and enjoy what Kapiti has to offer. However, Kapiti is not on all the networks for motorhome and caravan association websites and things. In fact, we're completely missing. We're not known as a motorhome-friendly town. We're completely missing from that huge list of towns and maps of towns that gets the advantage of all of those visitors. They're going to be around for another year or two at least, and then after that, who knows what will happen. So I have taken this to the Mayor's Office. I've had numerous discussions with Group Manager James Jefferson, with Natasha herself in the early days, with Alison Law, and also with Jackie Muir, Regulatory. It went to the point 3 weeks ago where, yes, this plan for a simplified amendment that was decided would be appropriate to get the benefits that and changes that are needed, would be taken to an SLT meeting 2 weeks ago and then hopefully brought to this table to the table here today. However, it's not. I'm not sure what happened there, but all I'm asking, councillors, is that we put in a little window of opportunity. I tell you what, if this policy review can't get allocated for and funds allocated for and resources, well then it's not going to happen, but it's just going to mean that window's there for something else, I guess. So I have got from MB the results of the grant, the specifics of what funding came to Kapiti. We have received $137,600 out of $175 applied for, and I have photographed that and sent you all an image to show that basically data collection and surveys on camper behaviour and understanding of freedom camping in the Kapiti area to assist council planning for the future seasons, $18,300. A project manager to deliver initiatives, $32,000 funding. $61,670 is for additional installation of additional rubbish bins for the season, servicing costs for toilet facilities and waste management. And $75,930 to continue to run our very successful community ambassador scheme, so that we have ambassadors that visit our camps, our motorhome sites, not regulatory officers. And we just want to make sure, and I just want to make sure that those ambassadors have a good policy behind them that's tweaked to bring it up to date. And that's what I'm asking your support for.
Thanks, Councillor Elliott. We have Councillor Holborough. Now on debate.
I really appreciate all the effort that Councillor Elliott's put into this, and I agree that we need some work around this. And I thank her for bringing us the information about the grant. I'm not hearing anything in what she's read out, and I've had the chance to look at it in my emails, though, around any funding for review of plans or policies. It's all around deliverables and the ambassador program. So I'm not seeing any extra capacity within that grant, though of course it's really wonderful work that the grant will enable. In terms of bringing a paper in the new year to review the policy, I would be more inclined to get through the work that we've got in front of us, which is a full suite of work for the team, rather than the team having to even deliver a paper, which in itself is quite a lot of work. And we've identified quite a lot of information that needs to be in that paper. And if that's happening next year, then I would prefer, as our group manager has suggested, just to wait until we do that review next year, when we'll be able to consider these other pieces of work that councillors have identified. I agree the art strategy is a very high priority, the subdivision policy absolutely essential, the local alcohol policy is something that there's been a huge call for in the community, and we can look at those things all together and put this in there as well as we move forward into the next lot of work, rather than getting distracted by trying to amend a policy which is unenforceable anyway. I'd prefer to just wait those few, it'll only be a few extra months, and then consider properly working through a bylaw process. That's how I would like to see this move forward. So while I thank Councillor Elliott for bringing this to the table today, and certainly it's been useful to know about these initiatives that are happening and to get this on the program for next year, I don't think now is the appropriate time to do it. We've got a full suite of work here, and I'd like to see that progressed. Thanks.
Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Just speaking in support of Councillor Elliott's additional recommendation there, because I am keen to see what potentially could get moved around in order to make this fit. And I take Councillor Holborough's point entirely there, but I think I'd be keen to see what options are available for that and then evaluate it from there.
Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, and thank you, Jackie, for doing the background work on this. So I suppose I have a number of thoughts on this. So, so the policy has been in place a number of years. It is probably out of date, but I don't think it's actually broken. Given the fact that we have a suite of work that we've just agreed to request today, so I think if I'd be more supportive of a bylaw rather than a policy. So as it stands, I would rather just let the current policy sit where it is. So I think also the other point that Councillor Elliott has brought up is the allocation of spending of funding, and I think that's actually quite separate from what is being proposed today. So, and I certainly agree that the landscape has changed, particularly over the last few months. But I know from being the Waikanai Community Board Chair that Waikanai Beach has been quite a hot spot in terms of freedom camping, and there were a lot of issues there. But by doing some simple infrastructure changes, things are actually working well there. So I won't be voting for this recommendation.
Councillor Buswell.
I think from a tourism destination point of view, Kapiti has always been quite domestically driven in terms of its tourist occupation, and I think that having a clearer and a better understanding of the freedom camping or the responsible camping policy going forward and allowing people to spend a little more time here just opens that window of opportunity up for local business to capitalise also on that spend from the responsible campers. So from that perspective, I'll be supporting Jackie's motion.
So last scan around the table, I don't see any other than Martin. Councillor Halliday.
Just building on Councillor Compton's and Buswell's views, I think we're behind the eight ball on the tourism attraction side of things with regards to the response to COVID. I think it's important that we do attain the camper-friendly status sooner rather than later. So I'd like to see the policy tweaked. I don't know if there's enough information in front of me with regards to how that all works. But I do think we need to tweak it sooner rather than later, sort of scenario. I am concerned about the name. I don't like the term freedom camping. I do like the term responsible camping or another such name. Perhaps that can be something that's discussed through the policy review or the policy tweak as well. So, yeah.
All right. Last call. No further elected members. Otherwise, I'm going to close it off and then write a reply from Councillor Elliott. No, don't see any. So, look, good discussion, and I've allowed it to go on. From my perspective, I just recently put a notice of motion through the appropriate channels to the community board. And so that was in advance of the meeting, tabled at the board meeting around a local alcohol policy. That will then be considered by this table at an up-and-coming report, and then I imagine that there'll be advice given around the implications for that. I was careful on the wording of that, conscious of resources, and so rather than, even though there was pressure from within my community to do that now, the wording said at the end of the beach bylaw review, talking with the team, the resources that were available. So I won't be supporting this, not because I don't support freedom camping or responsible camping, not because I don't support business or any aspect of that. I just don't support making decisions when we aren't actually fully aware of what we're deciding on, in the sense of the resources required, what we potentially will be stopping or not doing, or if we need to provide additional resources, how or where that will come from. We can't go out to the ratepayers and ask for additional funding midway through a year to fund something that we have just decided around the council table without even a staff report around what's involved in that. So I do support what Councillor Elliott's requesting around encouraging camping to the area, and I'd like to think that we could do that with the existing tools in the toolbox. Hence the reasons why we didn't do it previously, and as Councillor Pravanov has said, that worked. We have no shortage of campers that I can certainly see when I go out to Otaki Beach or Tohoro. There's certainly a strong presence of them in the areas that I'm in, and I'm just not confident that we are limiting ourselves in terms of people choosing us as a destination because of what we currently have in place. Whether we can do more work around promoting that, and agree with Councillor Elliott around the motorhome friendly towns, absolutely support any extra work we or the ED team can do in that space. I'm just not sure a review of the existing policy we have in place is the best way to do that. And kind of agree with Councillor Pravanov, if we were going to do something, it might be potentially looking at a bylaw, but I wouldn't be supporting that today either, for the reasons that I've outlined around not having a staff report around it, resources required, so forth. I don't think it's good decision making, making a decision without knowing the other implications through making that decision. So I respect each other's views. I think I've allowed it as chair to have a good go. And so I'm going to hand it over to Councillor Elliott for her right of reply, and then we're going to put it to the vote.
Look, thank you very much. I am seeking your support of this on behalf of the very many people who are active around the country in motorhomes and caravans who live here and who want nothing more than to be able to show off Kapiti to the rest of New Zealand through all channels available for free. Those people are worth a lot of money to us, and the current policy as it is a wee bit prohibitive towards us being known as motorhome friendly and meeting all that criteria. So yeah, it will need a bit of tweaking. Interestingly, it is motorhome and caravan owners in Waikanae Beach themselves who have come and begged for us to get it right. Because of difficulties that they've had absolutely ongoing with our visitors to date. And this is just such a great opportunity. Timing is everything. And hence this paper is here today. Potentially between my colleagues and I, we could have had 3 amendments to what was brought in the paper. This is just the way things happen. This is decision making. So I would appreciate your support, and opening a window here through the Policy Bet program for us to start this discussion and all hopefully make this really work better for everyone in Kapiti. Thanks.
All right, so Tim, I'm going to put that to the vote and imagine there'll likely be a call for division. So all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? No.
Division.
Thank you, Councillor Compton. So the ayes, if they could put their hands up.
So Councillor Randall, Councillor McCann, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Compton, Councillor Buswell and Councillor Halliday.
The noes?
Councillor Pravanov, Councillor Holborough, Councillor Coots and Councillor what is it just called? Hanford, sorry.
You can deal with them later, Sophie. So the ayes have it. Congratulations, Councillor Elliott. Sean, do you want to, you may not, but I just want to provide an opportunity in terms of next steps from here around.
So I would just, I guess, reiterate what I think has been said 2 or 3 times, both by myself, both by Natasha, in terms of the organisation's capability to do additional work over and above the already burgeoning work program that we have. So if the councillors have voted that they want us to have a look at that, even bringing a report back to you on the implications associated with that will add to the already existing workload. And I said that wouldn't be before the end of the year, and we would have to go away now and have a look at what the time frame might look like for bringing that report back to the council. And again, knowing what people are involved in at the moment, that we've got Christmas ahead of us, again, I don't expect that we would be able to do that in advance of either the end of January or possibly February, March. But again, we'd have to have a look at what that means in terms of timeframes.
All right, team. Thanks very much, Sean. I had intended to try and stop at 12 for a coffee break, and the discussion obviously continued on and on. So if we can stop now for 10 minutes, given that it's already 11:30, and be back in the chambers at 20 to 12.